I just wanted to say hi and thank you. My name is OneMind Dogs Coach Niki Drage, and I'm really happy to see that you're joining my webinar. So basically, we're going to go over the 5 things stopping you from getting clean runs in agility. And I've been coaching OneMind Dogs agility for almost 6 years now, and been competing in agility generally for 20 years. And during all my times competing and coaching lots of different types of students and dogs, these are the 5 main points that always come up as the biggest issue. So I'm only going to basically briefly go over these points because we would be here all day if I'm very passionate about these topics. So if I could talk about them all, we'd be here forever. So let's go over them quickly, and then I will send you a series of emails after the webinar that deep dive into each topic, and you'll get some little course maps and some little videos and things like that to really get the idea and the feel for each of the topics and how they relate to you and your dog. So let's go back to connection. So connection is considered the cornerstone of the 3 C's, which is a concept in OneMind Dogs and stands for connect, commit, cue. And the reason that connection is the cornerstone is because without the connection, you can't see the commitment. And if you can't see the commitment, then you can't give an effective cue. So because of that, connection is the absolute most important starting point there. And it's so important because dogs naturally seek out this connection with the handler. So Janita says it as one of you is responsible for the connection. So if the dog, if you're looking at the dog, then the dog can focus on their job of performing the obstacles. Whereas if you're the one looking at the obstacles, or if you're lost on course, for example, and you're looking for numbers, then the dog has to take that responsibility to look for you. And then they can't focus on their job. And this is usually when you get dogs for example, flanking obstacles or running around the inside of an obstacle, knocking a bar, or going to an off-course obstacle because you've broken that connection. So I've got a little video. So if we have a look here, you can see dogs naturally reacting to that connection. So here Yako is turning his head and the dog is naturally changing the handling side. And then here you can even see Yako using his hand to cue the obstacle, but the dog still chooses the side where he is looking. Because the connection is more important than the hand for the dog. And in this case, Janita is looking at the tunnel, and so the dog also runs straight at the tunnel. And then in the second one, Janita is looking at the dog and getting that connection, and the dog is responding to her handling and taking the jump. So you can see there that dogs naturally react to connection in that way. So now if we go back to the slides, they also, as we said, can't focus on the performance if there is no connection. And it's also very common that people will break the connection during a handling technique. So when they, for example, do a front cross, because it can throw out your peripheral vision a little bit, it's common to break your connection. And that's when the dogs often turn wide or they don't get their collection in, because they can't focus on that if they're also trying to focus on getting the connection back with you. So that's why connection is so important there. The other bonus of having a strong connection is that you can actually predict your dog's intentions. So you can see where they're looking. You can see if they change their line or if they change their leading leg. These are all things that when you have a strong connection with the dog, you can actually see happening almost in slow motion and you can react to them. So then that prevents a lot of off courses because you have time to change your handling and give more information. And you can only handle for the dog if you're actually connected. And handling for the dog is something that we're going to discuss a little bit later. But at this point, it's just important to know that you need to be connected to do that. And connection builds trust and confidence from the dog. If you always are the one taking responsibility for having the connection, then your dog starts to trust that you will be responsible for that. And so they're confident in focusing on their job on the course of performing the obstacles. So reliable connection will increase their speed because they'll be more confident that you will take care of that part of the partnership. And so because of all of those things, connection means more clear rounds, more qualifying rounds. So we'll have another look at this video that I was just showing here. So this is from our International Training Week series. And basically, I'm just going to start it back from the start because it skipped ahead a little bit. But these are a seminar that's being held in Finland, and we're watching video of that seminar. And they're showing you the difference between when the handler does have the connection and when they don't on course, in a real course. So in this case, the handler has connection, but then breaks it when she sends the dog to the backside. And so the dog actually ends up taking the front of the jump because it wasn't getting that information from the handler. It was just trying to get that connection back, as you can see it doing even now. So the handler knew it was her fault, so she rewarded the dog. And then in the replay, you can see now she is turning her face much more and making sure she is responsible for the connection. And so the dog can focus easily on going to the backside. And it's very common that dogs will miss a backside send because the handler didn't have the connection when they were sending. So you can see here clearly the difference between where the handler is looking and where that causes the dog to go. And in this case, the handler breaks the connection as the dog is trying to commit to the jump. So the dog doesn't actually commit because it's trying to get the connection back from the handler. You can see here the dog looking at the handler to get that connection back. And this time she keeps the connection. And so even though the dog hesitates because of the previous rep, it still takes the jump because she's holding that connection and that eyesight to help support the jump. So you can see that there in slow motion. So connection is also a really common reason why dogs take refusals, because the handler breaks the connection too early. This is a case with a backside send with a tunnel in the background. So you can see just behind this backside send there's a tunnel. And when the handler was watching the wing of the jump and not the dog shot straight into the tunnel because it didn't have that connection. It just did its own thing instead of actually seeing what the handler is asking. Whereas you can see in this replay, Tulia is actually showing her what she did, staring at the jump instead of actually having connection with the dog. So now in the replay, she really makes sure that she's focused on that connection with the dog here strongly. And the dog has no hesitation and no doubt as to what it's being asked to do. And that off course is completely out of play. So when you have connection, the off courses are just not that big anymore. And then lastly, you can see here with this tunnel send, here the dog is obviously strongly seeking connection with the handler because the handler is pointing at the tunnel instead of actually connecting with the dog. Whereas here she's connecting with the dog and pushing forward to the tunnel, and the dog goes straight in the tunnel with no hesitation at all. So if you're getting hesitation in your in those sends, in forward sends or backside sends or sending to a tunnel, it's usually because you're looking at the obstacle and not at the dog. So that's a brief overview of connection. So now let's talk about handling for the dog. So what this basically means is that when you're connected to the dog, you can give them the handling information that they need on the course, because the obstacle doesn't need you. It doesn't need you to handle it. The dog needs you there. So when you point to an obstacle, all you're saying to the dog is that's next. And the dog says, okay, well, that's great, but what do you want me to do with it? Should I jump an extension? Should I be collecting? Am I turning? Am I going straight next? Am I going that way next? So they have no idea what you're actually telling them. Whereas if you say to the dog, okay, right now I want you to prepare for a tight turn, the obstacle doesn't even matter anymore. They just know that in the next few strides, there will be a spot where I need to turn. So they know that they need to collect and they might need to change leading legs, for example, but they then get all the information they need to safely proceed on the course without even caring about what the actual obstacle is that they are completing. So I have a little video about this as well. So this is Janita and Jaakko at their training hall, and Jaakko is showing you the difference between what it's like to handle for the obstacle, and that's the one that he's going to do first. Just wait for this one to load. Okay, sorry, that skipped a little bit, so I'll just restart it. There we go. Okay, so the first time he's going to handle for the obstacle, and you can see he's looking at the obstacle and basically just turning his body. So for the dog, that could mean go up here, go this way, go that way. And it just means take the obstacle and extension and then turn at some point. This time he's handling for the dog, and you can see he's got that strong connection for the dog, and he's clearly saying to the dog, like, slow down, get ready to turn. So that's an easy way to see the difference between handling for the obstacle and handling for the dog. So the other important thing about handling for the dog is you need to do the handling when the dog needs it. So it can be very common to walk a course and say, okay, I'm going to do a front cross when I get here, but I want you to change that way of looking at courses and instead be thinking, okay, when my dog is here, then they are going to be needing some information about a turn. So at that point, I will do a front cross. So you shouldn't be watching other people and seeing when they're planning to do a certain handling maneuver, because that has nothing to do with your dog. And also your dog is going to be different on the day. So obviously there's lots of different things that affect your dog's performance. So they might be feeling a little bit stressed, having an off day, or they might be overexcited and really confident. And every time that their mood changes, then also their commitment is going to change. And so their takeoff point will change. So you need to be prepared to be able to adapt your timing of your handling to what your dog needs on the day. And I've also got a little video about this. I thought I'd give you a couple of videos so you can really picture the differences. So this is another International Training Week video. Okay, so here you can see this handler. I'm just going to restart this again too. Sorry, they just jump ahead a little bit when I start them. This handler doing a wrap here, and then here she's trying to turn the dog away from the tunnel and onto the dog walk. And you see she does the reverse spin, but she just looks at the jump and picks a moment and does it. So the dog turns quite wide and she ends up waiting for the dog and only just getting to the dog walk at the same time as the dog, because she was hesitating, seeing if the dog was actually turning. Now this time she's doing the handling for the dog. You can see she's clearly saying to the dog, hey, slow down. She sees it react to the handling and she can get out of there. So now she also gets to the end of the dog walk before the dog does, and she has more time to do the next bit of handling. So I'm just showing you again in slow motion here, the handling for the dog versus the handling for the obstacle. You can see the difference in how the dog jumps and also in her confidence that the dog is actually going to turn and come back. So as well as it giving more information to the dog, it also means that you see how the dog's reacting, and that gives you more time to get out of there and skip ahead to the next section of the course. It can be quite hard to see for yourself if you're actually handling for the dog or for the obstacle, especially when things are happening quickly and you're feeling rushed. So in this case, I really recommend that you video your training, if not just for yourself, but also to send to us to watch. So especially as an Agility Premium member, you can send in unlimited videos of your training and your competitions, and we can give you advice about what you can change or what's happening, or maybe a point where you're missing the connection, and just such a small thing that you can change makes such a huge difference to your agility overall. So please video your training as much as you can, even if you just use your phone and a tripod. And looking back at the videos yourself, you'll pinpoint it yourself. You'll see the differences. And if you don't know how to fix it, that's when you can contact us and say, help, what do I do? Or why is my dog doing this? And we can show you. So then the next point here I'm going to talk about is handling lines rather than obstacles. So when we talk about handling lines, when you first walk a course, the very first walkthrough at a competition, I always say to my students, I want you to think of the series of lines on this course that you would like your dog to take. So don't even think about how you're going to handle it, because as soon as you think about that, you start to think about you and what your capabilities are, rather than your dog and what they need and what information they need. So when you see a course as the lines that your dog should ideally take to be safe and to have comfortable takeoff and landing points and to clearly see the next obstacle, then you can start thinking about how you will handle those lines to get to those spots and to give your dog that information. And then your handling completely changes, because you start to handle more for the dog rather than just for yourself and getting yourself around the course. So if we look at these two images, in the first one, you can see that the handler is simply pointing at jump 2, and the dog is going to be taking jump 2, but has no information about what's next. They don't know if they should jump an extension and take the jump at the top, or take the jump to the right, or turn and take the tunnel. There's so many options here, and the handler hasn't given that dog any information and probably won't until it takes off. Whereas if we look at the second image, here you can see the green handler has moved into the dog's space onto their normal line and is shaping the dog around themselves, so that by the time the dog comes around, it will be square to jump number 2. And so it will land already almost facing jump 3. And from this point, the handler would do a reverse spin, so that they are also cueing a turn for the dog by turning against the dog. And so then there's no doubt left in the dog's mind. So it's taken off close to the jump. It was square, so it's going to land close to the jump. And then it's been cued a turn, so it's going to turn. And then the only option really is 3. So by simply handling the line on 2 instead of just pointing to 2, it has changed the picture for the dog altogether, because now the other obstacles are not even in play anymore. So handling the line makes a big difference in this way. Handling the line is also super important out of tunnels, because often the dog will come and look at you out of a tunnel and try to reestablish that connection. And if you're not handling the line and connected to them, they can often come in and miss the next obstacle. So we've got a great example of that here from actually one of my good friends, Lynn Madden, whom a lot of you will already know. She is also a OneMind Dogs instructor and on the customer service team. And here she is at my arena, and we're doing some training on this course. And this jump is after the pink tunnel is actually quite offset. So the dog needs to do a bit of a lead change out of the pink tunnel to get to that jump. And the video is a little bit fuzzy, so it's a little bit hard to see. I apologize. But this first time she's looking at the jump and pointing at the jump, and the dog just runs right past it. It doesn't even see the jump because it hasn't done that lead change. It doesn't appear on the dog's line. So Lynn is rewarding the dog because she knew that it was her handling and not having the connection and handling the line. So then this time, we're going to show you in slow motion here. You can see Lynn clearly looking at the jump and pointing at the jump and having no connection here with the dog. So the dog is looking at Lynn, trying to establish that connection there. And that's why she doesn't even see the jump at all. So now we'll show you a repeat where Lynn clearly handles the line and has the connection, and the dog clearly goes and sees the jump straight away. So you can see here she's connecting strongly and she pushes on the dog's line, and the dog immediately drifts out and gets that jump and sees it straight away. So such a small thing out of a tunnel can make such a big difference between an elimination for missing a jump and a clear round. So you can see why handling lines is so important. So now let's go into leading legs. Now this is one of my favorite topics, and I'm super passionate about it because for me it made the biggest difference in my agility and in making agility safer for my dogs and making it easier and more fun. And also it changed how I design courses. So I'm quite into course design, and knowing how dogs use their leading legs is really exciting in terms of making different challenges in course designs. So a bit of a brief overview of leading legs. So when dogs are running, they're cantering, one leg is in front compared to the other front leg, and that's the leading leg. Dogs can only turn to the side of the leading leg that they're on. So if they're on the right leading leg, they can only turn right. If they're on the left leading leg, they can only turn left. In order to change leading legs, they need to do a lead change, which they will do depending on a variety of factors. So if we're going through the main factors, the most important one is the side that the handler is on. So if you're on your dog's right, they are much more likely to be choosing the right leading leg because they're preparing to turn towards you. The second factor is the obstacle. So if you have a tunnel that turns to the left, the dog will naturally choose the left lead as they enter the tunnel so that they can turn left. Same with the weavers. Then we've got the handling. So a handling technique, front cross, blind cross, rear cross, all cue a leading leg change. And lastly, the favored side. So if there's no clear option for the dog, then they will choose the side that they favor, much like a human is right or left-handed. So if we take this tunnel picture here as an example, in the first tunnel, the handler is on the dog's left. So that makes the dog choose the left leading leg. And the tunnel also turns left. So that also supports the left leading leg. So this is an easy situation for the dog. If we look in the next diagram, you can see now that the handler is on the dog's right. So that supports a right leading leg, but the tunnel is turning left. So that's supporting a left leading leg. So now there's a conflict in the lead leg options for the dog. For a novice or an experienced dog or a handler-focused dog, this is a really difficult situation. And often they will come in to the tunnel on the right leading leg still because that's where the handler was, and then they won't be able to turn, so they'll turn around and come back out of the tunnel and get a refusal. The more experienced the dog becomes, the more that they already pre-planned a lead change and can easily change leads themselves when they see that the tunnel is coming up. So in experienced dogs, this might be a much easier situation. But if you have a dog that, for example, will pull out of a tunnel if you're on the incorrect side to support the leading leg, then that's something that you need to train. So you can also handle it by turning your chest and using your offhand to cue a lead change as the dog enters the tunnel. And you can place a reward at the exit of the tunnel to teach them to cope with this situation. But when you understand leading legs, you can already understand when you walk a course that this is a difficult thing. So you need to support your dog here. So it really opens up a whole new understanding of how your dog is seeing the course and how they're going to act when they're running a course. So as I was mentioning here with this tunnel example, this is a really common reason for refusals. Also for running past the weaves. So often the dogs will be on the wrong leading leg because they are watching the handler because of a lack of connection, for example. And then they don't see the weaves until it's too late for them to change leading legs to get into the weaves. So then they say, oh, it's all too hard, and they run past. And that's very common with new dogs, novice, fast dogs especially, because they only have a couple of strides to do that lead change in. It also often causes off courses. If the dog is on the wrong leading leg, they will see the wrong obstacle on course, and knocked bars, because if the lead change is cued too late, the dog will try to do the lead change in midair, and then that will very often cause them to drop their hind legs and knock the bar. So I also have a little video on this one. This is quite an interesting video that Janita took of a very common issue in the weaves. And in this case, there's a tunnel here, And when the dog comes out of the tunnel, she has seen Janita running past the tunnel. So she is on her outside leg because she is predicting that the next obstacle is this way because of Janita running across the tunnel. But then because Janita doesn't support the line to the weaves, the dog changes leading legs and follows her instead of taking the weaves because she didn't handle there. So you can see here the dog is on the leading leg on the left lead towards the weaves, and then because there's no handling and no connection, the dog changes to the right leading leg and now cannot enter the weaves anymore. So that's when you would get a refusal on the weaves. So with handling, you can help the dog to do that lead change and to maintain the outside leg leading so that the weaves are now easy for the dog. So here she turns her chest and handles the lead change, and the dog can easily enter the weaves. And you can see then that the left leg stayed leading in this slow motion video here. So now the dog comes out on the left lead, and because of that handling, it stays on the left lead into the weaves, and that makes the weaves easier for the dog. What you could even do to make them easier again would be to be on the other side of the weave. So then both the obstacle and the handling are supporting the correct leading leg. So then that's even easier for the dog. And you'll see that in the next bit of this video. Here you can see again that the correct leading leg stays that way because of the handling. And that makes it easy for the dog to enter the weaves. So now Janita is showing that if it doesn't need to do that extra lead change because the handler is on the other side, then it's even easier for the dog to perform the next obstacle. So you could do, for example, a handling change here, and then the dog is already on the correct lead as it comes out. Or from a different obstacle, for example, it's easier because the dog is already on that leading leg. So leading legs are really, really interesting when you watch slow motion videos and you see why your dog changed leads or where they change leads. You get to learn more about your dog and how they handle these sorts of situations. Now, also, when you cue lead changes, so basically when you're doing a handling technique, it's really important to be early enough for the dog to have time to change the leads on the flat, because if you're cueing it as the dog takes off, then they're either going to try and change it midair, in which case, as I said, the bar will come down, or they will crash land on their shoulder because they're trying to turn too late on the wrong leading leg, or they'll end up taking 3 or 4 extra correction strides and end up with a really wide turn. So cueing that lead change at least a stride before takeoff is really important. And lastly, too many lead changes for some dogs can actually be really demotivating, especially if the dog hasn't learned how to easily change leads during the foundation training, which is why we put such a big importance on lead changes during our foundation program, because when they don't naturally do that, then if there's a course where you're asking them to do a lot of lead changes in a row, the dog can easily break into a trot because they're just getting demotivated from doing that over and over. So if you have a dog like that, there are exercises you can do to help them find the lead changes easier. But also when you walk a course, you might want to think about how many lead changes you're asking the dog to do. And is there another line that's not that much longer where the dog has to do less lead changes that might be more motivating for the dog? So that's another way of looking at a course when you're walking the course. Now, the last topic that I want to cover is trusting your training and your dog. This has been coming up a lot lately for me, with lessons especially, that if you're competing with your dog, then any skill that you are asking them to perform on the course, you should be able to trust that you have trained that skill adequately for your dog to do it, or you shouldn't be asking for it. So what I mean by that is it's really important to not baby your dog when you're running a course, because when you're really hesitating and delaying your handling, for example, waiting for the dog to take the jump before you move away, instead of that actually being supporting for the dog, it actually makes them hesitate more, because you're not giving them any information. You're just saying, oh, I don't trust you to take that jump, so I'm going to wait to see if you actually do it. And because you're doing that, your dog ends up hesitating, going, oh, why are you hesitating? Why aren't you giving me information? And then it's just a vicious circle where neither of you are happy, and you end up with refusals and the dog loses confidence. So it's really important that you trust that your training has been adequate. And if it hasn't, then you go, okay, well, that's a skill that my dog doesn't have yet, so I'm not going to ask them to perform that yet. So maybe you'll withdraw them from the course, or you'll do not for competition and reward in the ring, for example, and you'll put that on your list for homework. If you're not 100% sure if you can trust that skill, but you think it's possible, then I would just say go for it. trust the skill, and if something happens like the dog refuses or doesn't understand what you've asked, you'll know, okay, we're not quite there yet, we'll put that on our list for homework, and then actually train the homework so that next time you can use it, rather than having to compensate for not having that skill again the next time you face it on a course. So as I mentioned down here, so delaying your cues is actually unfair for the dog, because rather than supporting them by not doing a turn until they've already landed, you're just being unfair by not giving them the information they need to have a comfortable and safe turn. So it's really important to still cue early. So quite often I've found that in seminars, I'll say, okay, I want you to cue a stride before takeoff. And then the handler will say, well, then my dog will refuse. So then I say, well, let's train the dog to stay committed, even if you're giving them information to turn, rather than just delaying your timing of handling because your dog doesn't have that skill to stay committed yet. So it's important to have a really solid plan that you trust. So if you have trained and practiced your skills enough that you trust that they will work, then it's much easier when you go and walk the course to have a solid plan that you'll go, yep, that will work, we have that skill, and not just go, oh, I'll see where my dog is on course and I'll decide when I get there, because that's when you get that hesitation where you're not sure if you trust what's happening, and then the dog doesn't either. So as I said, you need to commit to the handling that you have planned, and then if you have a fault, that's fine, you know that that's learning, and then you'll train that skill later. Better to do that than to run the whole course sort of being careful and babying and feeling uncomfortable and your dog losing confidence. So Janita says it often in her seminars, would you rather spend 6 years compensating for a lack of skill, or would you just train the skill? And she often says that in regards to weaves. If your dog only weaves on one side, do you want to spend 6 years trying to figure out how to get to that side of the weaves? Or do you want to spend a month training the other side and then you don't have to worry about it anymore? So in that regards, that's very important. It's also actually much easier to focus on connecting with your dog if you have trust in your plan and your skills. Because if you've already worked all those out, all you really need to do is watch your dog and see when they're at that point where they need the information, and then you give the information, which you've already planned, so you don't need to think about it. So in that case, if you find connection difficult, it's likely because you don't trust your plan or your handling or the dog's ability to do what you've trained them to do. And so you're thinking about that and not about the connection. So that's a really common thing that happens. And if you trust the dog will trust you. So if you run your baby dog like they know what they're doing and you trust them, then they will become that dog that does know what it's doing and that you can trust. So it's really important to, when you start competing, that you start feeling like that straight away. Don't go out there thinking, oh, they're my baby, they need lots of help, because then they will feel that way and it will happen. So trust your dog. I'm sure you've trained great skills and better than you would ever think, but you won't know it unless you try it. So the other thing that I just wanted to say is not really one of my points, but I feel very strongly about it, to always focus on the dog first. So when you come out of a run, you should always be rewarding your dog and celebrating with your dog first. Ignore all the people and the coaches saying, yeah, you did amazing, and that's great. And you say, thank you, but focus on that dog and rewarding them and cooling them down, making sure they're happy and putting them away. And then you can get into your head and analyze the course and what happened. And you can talk to your friends or your coach about like what to do for homework, those sorts of things. But if you're focusing on that and just ignoring your dog, then they don't know what's going on. Oh, have I done well? Have I not done well? So it's really important to focus on your dog first and make them the center of everything, basically. And then you'll have a dog that also always focuses on you, because they love to be with you and they know that they're going to get their recognition at the end of the run, and their bond with you will be stronger. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope you guys all really enjoyed the webinar and got a bit of an overview of the points and why they're so important. And as I mentioned, you will get a series of emails in the following week. So please keep an eye on your inbox, because we'll deep dive into these topics and there'll be lots of fun things that you can do with your dog. Please feel free at any point to contact us at support@oneminddogs.com, or if you're on the actual OneMind Dogs website, you can click the chat bubble in the bottom corner and you can talk to me or to one of my colleagues there. You'll also notice that there is a button down the bottom to download the OneMind Dogs Method ebook. Please have a look at that. It tells you a lot more about OneMind Dogs and all of these different aspects we went over. And you can also share this link with your friends if you think that they would be interested. So thank you very much for joining us. And that's everything that I had.